Ayurveda Part 2, what the heck are Mahabhutas? So I'll start with answering a few questions. What are the true origins of the 5 elements in you? How do the 5 elements show up in your body and your mind? And how do the Mahabhutas affect your happiness and well-being? And then I'll share a link to the quiz so you can discover what your dosha is. And we're going to do all of this today. So let's get started. Let's begin with exploring the Mahabhutas, the 5 great elements. So let's start talking about the origins of the Mahabhutas. So it's important to understand that our ground state and the ground state of the Mahabhutas is consciousness. And that's where we come from. Consciousness is our true origin and the origin of all physical. So there is an Ayurveda philosophy called Sankhya Philosophy that describes how each of our body-mind system came into physical form from the state of non-physical or consciousness. So it's a fascinating philosophy, and you're welcome to look into it deeper if you like. Again, it's called Sankhya Philosophy. And when we start talking about manifesting our physical form from the non-physical, we deeply understand that there is no separation between you and the force of nature, or that underlying energy that animates all physical matter. And so Sankhya philosophy describes the steps that we go from non-physical into physical. So it's fascinating if you'd like to look into it more. So there is a fundamental expression in Ayurveda that goes, as is the human body, so is the cosmic body. And as is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. So this phrase embodies the understanding that human intelligence is not separate from nature's intelligence. All physical matter is one with the beautiful, unbounded force of life. So the force that governs the growth of a single cell into 50 trillion cells that are currently functioning in your body-mind physiology is the same intelligence that orchestrates the changing of the seasons, the migration of animals, the growth of plants, and the movement of the stars. Because the same intelligence that flows in nature flows in every cell of our bodies, understanding the fundamental building blocks of nature allows us to better understand ourselves. So we carry that life force energy from our non-physical origins into the physical form. And that's where we get into the doshas and understanding the body-mind system. Because the doshas are their description of our physical characteristics. So in order to understand the doshas, which we'll chat about next weekend, we need to understand the 5 great elements. So the 5 elements, also known in Sanskrit as the Mahabhutas, are the building blocks of nature and our physical universe. Everything in the physical world is composed from a particular ratio of these 5 elements, just like ingredients in a recipe. So if you had a recipe with 5 ingredients, you'd be able to experience the qualities of all those ingredients within that recipe. However, whatever ingredient you have the most of will stand out and be prominent in that recipe. So you'll experience that one ingredient a little bit more. So you'd be able to taste it, feel it, touch it, sense it more of that dominant ingredient than other ingredients in the recipe. So if you put a lot of one ingredient in a recipe, you'll have more of those qualities in the final product. So this creation process is similar to the 3 doshas. The mixing of the ingredients, or the 5 elements, creates our individual dosha, which can be either vata, pitta, or kapha. So the 3 doshas are distinguished by the primary elements that you carry, or the primary ingredients. So you'll carry the qualities of your predominant elements mentally and physically. And if you have more space and air, you'll be a vata. If you have more fire and water, you'll be a pitta. And if you have more earth and water, you're a kapha. So as we go over the Mahabhutas today, remember your dosha type if you know it. Remember it, keep it in your memory, and see if you can pinpoint how your predominant elements show up in your body and your mind. And if you don't know your dosha, that's okay. For now, just listen and see if you can relate to any of the characteristics of the Mahabhutas when we go over it. And then we'll talk about the quiz that you can take to discover your dosha type later in class today. So everything in the universe, the world, the doshas, and all living creatures, including you, are made up of the Mahabhutas, these 5 great elements. So let's describe the Mahabhutas a little bit further. So again, the Mahabhutas are the principles that create the doshas and the patterns or characteristics of the doshas. These 5 elements, they exist both within us and in the world around us. And they are also the 5 principles that make up everything that we perceive through our senses. So in order to understand the doshas, we need to understand the elements. So let's talk about each one individually in detail and how the elements show up in the world, in our bodies, and in our mind. So the 5 great elements can be described as space, air, fire, water, and earth. So let's start by talking about space. So the space element, or akasha in Sanskrit, represents the open expanse in which everything is contained. It's negative space, it's emptiness, and it's necessary for anything else to happen. Think of a blank canvas. It offers emptiness and pure potentiality, where anything can be created within it. So the artist has the potential to create anything on that canvas that she chooses. So space represents pure potential and infinite possibilities, the potential for anything to happen within that space. So it's what existed before our known universe. And we had to first have space for the entire universe to be created. So space means potential, the potential for anything to happen. And in the universe, space expresses itself as the vast emptiness that underlies the physical world. The universe actually has more space than matter. And within our bodies, space is the gaps between and within cells through which information flows. So in the physical body, we have a lot of space. If we could look very closely beyond the molecules and between the atoms, we would see space, and we would understand that there is actually more space than matter within the body, just like the universe. So understanding that we have space within our body, in our physical form, and that material things also mostly are space, is very important when we set intentions to know that, because we are actually accessing that space to set our intentions and to use it to create and use that pure potentiality. So it allows us to access the quality of potentiality with all things that look physical but are actually mostly space. And there's also space in the mind. So space is represented in the mind by space between our thoughts. So, and that is what we tap into when we meditate, that gap between the thoughts. So the space between the thoughts is silent and holds pure potentiality. So when we put attention on that space, we start to experience that potentiality in that silence. And in that space, any thought can arise. It puts a stop to one, something else can arise out of that gap. So just like a blank canvas we spoke of earlier, anything can be created in that space between the thoughts. And that space, again, is the potential. It's the potential. and it is for new thoughts, new creativity, new ideas to occur. So that's why we meditate, and that's why meditation is so important to practice, because it allows us to have a healthy mind and overall well-being. So now we have space. And what is the first thing to happen within space? Movement. Movement is the first thing that happens within space. So the air element, or vayu in Sanskrit, is the animated force of life. It is present in everything that moves. Air represents change, or change of position within a space. So when things move within space, you can feel the movement. The movement may not be seen, but it can be felt through your skin, through touch. You may be able to feel it. So externally in our environment, the force is represented as wind. And internally in our body, air is the movement of breath, our circulation and nerve impulses. Movement is our digestive tract, our circulatory channels in our lungs. It can be seen in the macro level in these waves and on the cellular micro level. So this movement is happening all the time in every cell of our bodies. And anywhere there's movement in the body, that movement represents the air element. And movement allows for change and new possibilities. And movement in the mind is represented by thought after thought. So when we get out of balance, that happens more so. And movement of thought is from the air element. So let's talk about fire. The fire element, or Agni or Tejas in Sanskrit, is present in everything that generates heat, light, or transformation. So when air within space starts to move, it creates friction and heat. So space and air are necessary for fire to be created. Fire represents the principle of transformation. Fire can transform physical matter from one thing to another. So fire expresses itself in the outer world as the sun, and fire shows up internally as our digestive and cognitive processes. So fire allows us to experience digestion, detoxification, creativity, and transformation. Anything in the body that contains chemical reactions like digestion and detoxification is represented by the principle of fire. So fire transforms us physically by transforming food into the cells of our body. So fire in the mind transforms the many individual thoughts into solutions, insight, and inspiration. So when you're thinking and working, you're increasing fire and creativity in the mind. So finding those solutions and solving problems, that's all part of fire within the mind. So once you have fire and heat, things start to condense and become more solid. And we begin to see more cohesion. And things begin to come together in denser form. And moisture in the form of steam is being produced from the heat, which is the element of water. So the water element, or jala in Sanskrit, connects and nourishes the physical substance of our body. So when we say water, we're talking about the cohesive principle. Water is responsible for lubrication, cohesion, and continuity. In the universe, the planet is made up of 70% water, just like our bodies. And internally, our organs and systems are nourished by the rivers of our plasma. Our joints are lubricated by synovial fluid. Our central nervous system is protected by cerebrospinal fluid. So throughout the entire body, there is cohesion and lubrication. And water principles show up in the mind as ideas that we carry from day to day, day into the next day. It is cohesion of thoughts that support us in the memory of our daily lives. So we can then form stories and solutions from the cohesion of those collections of thoughts. So without that cohesion of thoughts, we wouldn't remember things from day to day. So water is important. and that cohesion principle is important. So as things become more cohesive, they become more solid, more dense, more gross. They become earth. So the earth element, or prithvi in Sanskrit, expresses itself as solidity or mass or form. So earth in the universe is reflected in nature as planets, mountains, rocks, all solid structures are represented by earth. Earth represents things and anything that you can touch or interact with. That's all physical and it's all earth. So earth in the body internally gives rise to our organs, our bones, our muscles, tendons, cartilage. Earth provides structure, form, and solidity. And it's matter, it's form. We can touch it and interact with it. So earth in the mind represents form, structure, solidity, again, but form of our stories and our thoughts. So thoughts come together in final cohesion or structure where they become long-standing belief systems. And those long-standing belief systems can influence our physical form. So we can carry those long-standing structured thoughts from day to day and through our entire life. So it's important to create long-standing thoughts that are positive and supportive to us because our thoughts will affect our bodies. So all of the elements are very important, and all physical objects include them. And we have all the elements: space, air, fire, water, and earth within us. So notice how they play an important role in our daily activity, physically and mentally. All right, so I'll share an example of how everything in the physical universe has space, air, fire, water, and earth. Take, for instance, this bowl. There is matter. We can touch it. There is lubrication and cohesive principles that hold the molecules together in order for it to have form. There's also transformation going on at a molecular level. If you leave it in the sunlight or near fire, the color and the structure changes and it gets worn and it breaks down. So the wood may change in color or form. And at that point, a transformation happens on a chemical level. There's also movement of subatomic particles. So even with things that look solid, the molecules are moving at lightning speed. And there's space between each molecule to allow for that container for the molecules to move and to exist. So this bowl has all elements within it. And similarly, the doshas, or our Ayurvedic body-mind type, have all the elements within them too. So the elements are, again, the building blocks of life, and they all build on each other. So how do the Mahabhutas apply to you and your health? Why are we talking about this? How does this even pertain to your health and well-being? So the combination of the Mahabhutas, or the 5 elements, create the doshas and the patterns or characteristics of your body type. So to create health and well-being in your body and mind, you need to balance the combination of elements that make up you and your dosha, which again are vata, pitta, and kapha. And vata again is made up of space and air. Pitta is created with water and fire, and kapha carries water and earth. So again, consider yourself a recipe, and which ingredients or elements on this list are more predominant in your body and mind? Do any of these characteristics sound familiar to you? And which elements do you think you carry more of? I'm curious if you recognize any of the qualities of the elements in your body and mind. So let me know in the comment section what you notice and if any of the characteristics of the elements resonate with you. And then we'll take a dosha quiz later in this class to discover your dosha, but I'd love to hear if you have insight from what you learned here today. So let me know in the comment section now what you discovered and what elements you think you carry before we take your dosha quiz. So knowing about the Mahabhutas offers understanding about building blocks that make up your body-mind physiology, which gives you the tools to have more compassion and empathy for yourself and create greater balance, health, and well-being. It's such a powerful thing to know about these elements that create up your physiology so you can better balance them. So to learn more about how to balance the 5 elements and your dosha, you can join us next weekend. We'll go deeper into the doshas and how to begin balancing your doshas and the elements that create those doshas. And I'll share that 3rd class and in this Ayurvedic series, this 9-part Ayurvedic series, and this class is called What the Heck Are Doshas? So, and we'll go deeper into doshas and how you can create your catered and perfect health for your dosha. So now we will shift gears and focus on a dosha quiz, and that determines your body, mind characteristics and your essential nature that you were born with. So again, Ayurveda has an individual catered approach of lifestyle medicine for each person by taking into consideration what your body, mind constitution is or what your dosha is. So I'm adding a link to a dosha quiz in the comments section that you can take to find out what your dosha is. And I'll add that link now. And when answering the questions, think in terms of which statements have been true for you for most of your life. So if you developed an illness in childhood or as an adult, think of how things were for you before that illness, specifically with mental traits and behavioral traits, since they tend to be more subjective. So you should answer according to how you have felt and acted most of your life. And knowing your dosha gives you insight on what you can focus on to personalize your healthy lifestyle choices through the 6 pillars of health. So through the series, we're going to talk about nutrition, movement, sleep, meditation, healthy emotions, and self-care, all catered to your dosha. We'll focus more on balancing your specific dosha and the 6 pillars of health in the weeks to come. But next weekend, learn more about your dosha and how to start balancing the element within your dosha. And that's in this 3rd class in the Ayurveda series called What the Heck Are Doshas? So for now, take the quiz and we'll continue our discussion through the next 7 classes in this beautiful Ayurvedic series so you can discover the best practices to balance your dosha. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. I will get your questions or comments, whether you're live or on the replay. So feel free to engage and have communication while you're watching the video. I will get them and I would happily answer. So thank yourself for giving yourself the gift of Ayurveda. And I thank you for joining me today, beauties. Namaste.